Hi, fairy tale friends. We just wanted to put a disclaimer at the top of the episode. We go into a lot of detail on the plot with Christopher Robin, and since it's not an identical remake, we wanted to give you a heads up. So, if you don't want the plot ruined for you, be sure to watch the movie first and then listen to the episode. Okay, thanks, guys. I'm Tara.
I'm Ryan.
We love Disney movies.
So we decided to watch them all, from Snow White
to Frozen 2 and beyond. Each episode will watch a different Walt Disney Animated Studios film and tell you all about it.
Did we like it? Does it hold up? Who's our favorite hero?
Or villain.
We'll give you history and fun facts about each movie.
And sometimes we'll invite our friends to watch along with us.
So put on your tiara
or your evil crown
and join us on our adventure.
This is Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to a Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries minisode where we strive to keep things under 45 minutes. And I believe today might be a little hard to do that because we very much enjoyed Christopher Robin.
We did, and this is coming to you late night. We
kind of decided to start watching this
at like 9 or 9:30.
It's 11:30 at night. We just watched it and we thought maybe we'll do it tomorrow, but no, the emotions are running. We're ready to talk about this because
it was delightful.
It was also, it was very melancholy. I think I said that about the Pooh one. Is it's kind of this like weird sweet spot of being a little sad.
Yeah.
But also like by the end of the movie, it was just, if you're watching the beginning, you're like, this is kind of sad and serious. Like the end is delightful.
The payoff is worth it,
yes.
I think. And I obviously took notes as I always do, and
came out in 2018.
Yes, and it opens, and it does it kind of throughout where it's the pencil drawings of the book. So it makes you feel like they did a lot of really beautiful nods to the original animated version where, in the animated version we talked about like they turn the page and it's the next chapter of the story, and they do that here. And you kind of jump in with the characters right away. You meet all the characters and you see Christopher Robin and it's his last day.
They kind of run you through, if you don't know the story of Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
Actually, that whole beginning part was based on the last A.A. Milne book.
Oh, okay.
Like Goodbye Christopher Robin,
yeah,
I think is what it was called. It was the last story. So a lot of that is from there. They kind of take you through like Christopher Robin loved to play and help them. There's all these drawings, and then they immediately take you. He's at a little party for them, and I will say, this was a movie where I felt like I could, with my eyes, I was seeing the sense of touch. Does that make sense? Because all the little CGI Eeyore and Tigger and Pooh
look so real,
are so fuzzy.
They're so tactile.
Yeah, like some people, like you could say, I can see a sound.
Yes,
or I could see a feeling. I could tell exactly how they felt.
We cringed every time.
Every
Pooh
time he
Bear's
eats honey,
fur touched honey, or vice versa. Honey touched his fur.
Because it looks so real.
It's so real. You're like, oh, that's gonna be so sticky and matted in his fur. And there's this whole scene later on where he's in Christopher Robin's house when Christopher Robin is an adult and he gets honey everywhere and he's stepping in it and then it's on the floor and then he gets stuck to the carpet and we were just like, ugh. But I think that's a testament to how real they feel along the way. I also wrote, I kind of wrote a little bit of this story because we find out more of Christopher as he becomes an adult. So he goes away to boarding school, and when they have this party for him, I wrote, "Sweets go right to my feet," and that was Tigger. They captured the language. Some of it was word for word from the stories, and some of it wasn't. And we talked about this with Cinderella. I think it was the perfect way to do a live action film because throughout the movie we see the stories that we know, but they're done in a different way. Like Tigger in the animated version looks in a mirror in Pooh's house when they're hiding from Heffalumps and Woozles, and he says he spots another Tigger and he's scared of him. And in this one, they're in a car and he sees himself in a rearview mirror.
But even, because I know we did Mary Poppins Returns and we talked a lot about how it just felt like they were trying to do the same thing over and over again. It doesn't feel like that here.
No,
because there are enough stuff that's original, but they capture the voice of the characters
Yes.
perfectly. There is a simplicity to Pooh that is also profound, and they do it so well
and they
here.
capture the emotions of each character, and I laughed probably more than I've laughed in any Disney film that we've done. Like, there's so many little joyful moments in the film.
Well, you mean any live action or just any Disney
I don't know.
film?
I feel like I laughed a lot.
We
in
giggled
this
a
one.
lot through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there were parts that we were like belly laughing, but
but
everything
a lot
was
of,
delightful.
Yeah, and you know, when I'm saying that they use the same stories, they caught you off guard in a good way because they were used differently, right?
Yeah.
They used the core of the story, but then they changed the surroundings, or they changed kind of how it happened, like Pooh with the red balloon and that whole, you know, so there's
Well, apparently that's a big plot point in 2011's Winnie the Pooh, which we'll find out. We'll be watching as part of our thing. The other thing that I really liked was there's a spot where Tigger starts to sing the song, and as soon as he's like, "Well," Eeyore goes, "Oh
Not
God!"
again.
He goes, "Oh, the song," and I was like, I've never felt closer to Eeyore. Like, I like that song, but it's so oversung to me.
I was very excited to hear it, of course. But Eeyore was so good in this one.
Played by Brad Garrett from Everybody Loves Raymond.
Yes.
This is like his 15th Disney voice.
Oh, cool.
He's in a ton of stuff. He did. The thing I remember most from was Finding Nemo. He's the blowfish.
Yes. Yeah.
Shark bait, ooh ha ha.
Yes. But he really captured the inflection, and I think the delivery of Eeyore's lines. Most of what I laughed at was Eeyore.
Well, him and Jim Cummings, who did the voice of Winnie the Pooh and Tigger,
okay.
are the only people who weren't cast specifically for the movie. That they were like, well, they've done a thing, but it was funny because apparently the director, the voice guy, or whoever's doing the casting director, brought in Brad Garrett and said. He goes. Well, I am Eeyore, and the casting director didn't realize he was doing the voice of Eeyore in like video games and stuff.
Yeah.
He goes, well, I am Eeyore. He goes, that's right, exactly. That's why we cast you. He goes, no, you don't understand. I am Eeyore. I do the voice of Eeyore.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, you're perfect.
That's so funny. So I did want to just talk a little bit about Christopher Robin's background because this is new story. So again, talking about a live action, adding to it. We find out he goes to boarding school, and when he's there, his father dies, and so it seems like he has to grow up at a very young age, and, you know, he's off in boarding school, he's away from his family, he's away from the 100-acre wood, and he grows up, he meets Evelyn. I think they meet on a bus or a train, his wife, but I think...
They meet on a bus, and he gets up to offer the seat, and then some jerk sits down instead, and they both kind of go... Oh, look at this guy. And then the next scene is them dating, which, what didn't I say, like, oh, I wish I'd met you on a bus in London. What a nice meet cute.
Yeah, and it cuts back to Pooh, and this is part of the melancholiness. He's waiting at the door for Christopher Robin to come back.
Yes.
And so we keep seeing shots of Christopher Robin growing up and then going back to the 100-acre wood, and the door's getting more like grown over with vines and different things like that. And then we find out that Christopher Robin goes to war. He fights in World War II. And when he goes away, his wife is pregnant. And when he comes home, his daughter's 3 or 4, I would say.
It's after 3 because they show her having the birthday cake. And it's interesting then because they keep showing again the book flipping. And it's like chapter 1.
It's like a new chapter.
Yeah, it's like literally like chapter whatever Christopher Robin meets Evelyn.
Yeah.
And then it's like Evelyn goes alone when she's left alone for 3 years. And it's very sad. Like they kind of drift apart, and when he comes back and he meets his daughter, it's that situation where the daughter's kind of like timid.
Yeah, because she's been told about her father but has never met her father.
And you can tell like everything that's wrong with Christopher Robin has to do with how some of it has to do with how he feels after the war.
Yeah, and I think it's also he's just so focused on work. And I wrote he's kind of a combination of Scrooge McDuck and Mr. Banks from Mary Poppins. He's got, the Scrooge McDuck is in because his job is to save the company money, so he's constantly looking for efficiency at this luggage.
He's the head
company.
of the efficiency.
Yeah, and then the Mr. Banks role is he's so focused on work, he's not really paying attention that his family really needs him. Like his family needs needs him to be there and be present, and he's not.
So his family's going to go on a vacation, and he's been kind of coerced by a superior at the office to
Giles.
work over the weekend, who's played by, I forgot the actor's name, but he plays Mycroft Holmes in the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock. But he gets kind of coerced into working.
It's very stressful at work. Basically, it's we're gonna close this whole division unless you can find a 20% worth of cuts.
And he says to, he has to tell his wife and his daughter, like, I can't go. And there's all this terrible stuff, like his wife's like, okay, of course. And he's like, well, no, she's kind of expecting her to be sad. She's like, I knew this would happen.
And he goes,
I feel like I haven't seen you laugh in 7 years. I feel like this. I didn't fall in love with you because you were efficient and because you were looking to get a great job. I fell in love with you because you danced with me.
Yeah, and he goes to put his suitcase away, and he's like, where's my suitcase? She's like, I never packed it. Because she knew he was not going to go away.
There's a lot of gut punches from Haley Atwell, who's in this again after being in Cinderella. I mean, I think we found she's the secret magic sauce in the good Disney live action.
Yeah. But
Haley Atwell Jenkins is what I'm going to call her.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Well, I think if something, God forbid, were to happen to you, you'd want me to be happy.
Wow,
and the only way
really
I could possibly
really planning ahead. But I think we get an insight into the toll his focus on work is, and his focus away from his family, the toll that takes on his family. Mm-hmm. We also see that he's pushing his daughter to work, and he's constantly like pushing her to work, and she's going to go to the same boarding school he went to, and she's already read the whole reading list.
She wants to make him happy. It's important to her.
She wants to please him, and she's not really being a child because she's always working. And even when she asks him to read her a story, she has Treasure Island, and so she's hoping he'll read that.
It's such a ridiculous
scene. He reads like a history book.
Yes,
to her, and she's like, "I'm tired." And then he waits. This is another heartbreaking moment. He waits outside her door and notices the light goes on after he leaves her room. She wasn't tired. She just didn't want him to read a history book to her before bed.
The wife and the daughter go to the country for the weekend.
Well, first the daughter finds, because this is kind of important, the daughter finds his box of things that he takes to boarding school, which is all the drawings of Winnie the Pooh, and that, I think, kind of summons him remembering Pooh.
Yes.
And
Pooh wakes up in the 100-acre woods.
Yeah.
And he can't find anybody. And
which
it's very foggy
really
and gloomy.
Sad. Yeah, he's all alone. He can't find anyone. And we should also mention here, we loved how they designed the 100-acre wood.
Well, oh shoot, did I get that fact? It's actually shot in the park that most of the filming of the 100-acre wood scene take place at Ashdown Forest, which was the original inspiration for the setting.
Oh my gosh.
So
that's so
the
great.
Original 100-acre woods.
Oh, that's really sweet. So yeah, he sees the note, and she leaves him a note saying, you were such a great...
I didn't know you were such a good artist, Dad. Put this up next to my pictures.
It's him and Pooh. And so, we see Pooh all alone, wandering in the fog, like Ryan said, and he finally decides, I'm going to go through this door, which is the door that Christopher Robin always came through to come into the 100-acre wood. And he...
ends up in a park outside of Christopher Robin's house, which Christopher Robin is hiding from a neighbor who insists on playing gin rummy.
The neighbor is such a weird
character.
But he's always, I guess it's another way to show he doesn't do anything social. He's like, he doesn't do anything social. He's always promising to play gin rummy with the neighbor and never does. I think it's another. Yeah.
So he's hiding from that weird neighbor, and he finds Pooh, and he starts thinking, oh my God, I've cracked for a little bit. But one of the things I really liked about this movie is it wasn't the typical thing of, did I make this all up when I was a kid or whatever? It's like he believes it, but he's like, why are you here now?
Yeah, first he thinks he cracked, but then he's
that goes by very quickly.
Yeah, because he touches him and realizes he's actually real. He is there.
Touches his tummy, and then Pooh's very light. Was like,
yeah, and I like that when they sit down and their backs are to each other, they're on like these two benches that they have like a similar posture and it's a neat way to show the two of them kind of finding each other again.
And he's immediately like, well, the door should be here. Why is it here? It's actually in the cottage. So let's take Pooh to the cottage.
Yeah.
There's also the scene where he's wandering around the house, and I he just says very simplistic things that mean a lot in the situation.
Yeah, well, and the same thing with the door. He's like, well, because he says
I guess it's where it needs to be. He goes, well, it's not here. He goes, well, I guess we don't need it here anymore.
Yeah,
like, it's just very
so good. And, you know, oh, sorry, I gotta read my note here. Oh, this line was so heartbreaking to me. He says, I haven't thought about you and the friends in 30 years, and Pooh says, we think about you every day.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh,
there's a lot of real like simple writing, but very heartbreaking.
Yeah, and another scene before like we move forward with him going to the cottage and back to the 100-acre woods is when Pooh's rummaging through the house. We got a good laugh out of this. He tucks him in, he goes to sleep at night, and then in the morning he wakes up to a crash and he goes downstairs and all these dishes and the...
Pooh's just standing looking at these crashed shelves.
Yeah.
And he turns and looks and goes, your ladder is broken.
Yeah, and he goes, well, it's shelves.
Oh, that must be why it's so bad for climbing.
And then all the other shelves fall, like something rolls into
Yes.
it. But he takes him back to the cottage, and that's where his wife and his daughter went on holiday.
Real quick, they're on the train. This is all part of the thing that I like of we're watching it. We're like, can other people see this? Can see him?
Yeah.
Yes. He talks, and they kind of react. I'm like, what was that?
Yeah, and he tells Pooh to play nap time, and
Yes.
so that's the thing, like play nap time when he wants him to be still.
And Pooh also plays this game where he's looking out the window and just goes, house, dog, a man. It's called Say What You See.
Say What You See.
It's just so funny.
Yeah.
They get to Sussex where the cottage is, and he tries to kind of get rid of Pooh, like go back in. He's like, fine, finally I'll follow you, and he follows him in, and he gets stuck, and there's a moment where he goes, so this is what this feels like.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny.
And we will say that like we didn't love that he snuck by the cottage. He sees his wife, he sees his daughter, but it plays it plays out well.
Yes, the end of the movie, I think, does everything well, but there are times when I'm like, why don't you tell your wife and kids that you have to work or people will lose their job? Why are you hiding this from your wife and kids? Like, take your freaking daughter to this magical land that exists in a tree.
I do think, though, he needed to go through this part of the journey alone to find himself again. I will say that.
Because he goes back, he's wandering around in a circle with Pooh. He yells at Pooh. Pooh kind of runs off.
Pooh follows the footsteps, his own footsteps. Yes. That's another.
That's
story.
from one of the stories from the thing. He falls into a Heffalump trap, which is funny because he looks up and there's a sign at the bottom that says "Gotcha."
Yeah, and he loses Pooh in the fog.
There's a big part of this movie about Heffalumps and Woozles and how they don't exist, but it's like the Heffalumps and like. When he meets everybody else, like Eeyore and everyone, they all go, oh, look, it's a Heffalump, and they can't see Christopher Robin. Yeah,
the only one who can see Christopher Robin is Pooh, and he knows him right away from his eyes.
He goes, I can still see you looking out from there.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
But it's also that idea of, like, you've changed, you've become this thing that's, like, the bad thing.
You become the thing that, like, we were afraid of, or the thing that, like... We don't know.
Because that's what happened to everybody. The tree crashed, and then they heard a noise, and they thought it was a Heffalump, and so they're all hiding. Mm-hmm. So Christopher Robin goes off and starts play fighting a fake Heffalump and starts having fun again. And Eeyore, like, you see Eeyore kind of, like, start to see him, and then everyone else can see him.
Well, and Eeyore's the first one he finds after he loses Pooh. So he has
because he's floating in the river like he is in that one short where they're throwing sticks in the thing.
So he has Eeyore for a good amount of time before he finds all the other friends. And Eeyore's convinced he's a Heffalump. There's a lot of really funny lines there. And like Ryan said, the moment Eeyore realizes, he's like, oh, Christopher Robin, you're playing again.
Yeah.
I knew it was, that is you. So once they see that he's playing again and he's fighting the Heffalumps, and the same thing when he comes back from defeating the invisible Heffalump, all of the rest of the friends, Piglet and Roo and everybody, say, oh, Christopher Robin, we're so glad you're back. And it's such a sweet moment to be like, this is who we've missed and this is who you are.
Does this movie remind you of another movie at all?
No.
Where you have a character who went to a fantasy land, and then he grows up and he's working a lot. He kind of ignores his children. And then a character from that fantasy land gets him and takes him back, and he relearns how to play and how to be like he used to be.
Oh, Peter Pan.
Hook.
Yeah. Sorry, I was like, Peter Pan. Where are we going with this?
They had a thing. They had a thing about all the connections of Hook. It's like both films were set partially in London and are based on popular British children's books, which were adapted into animated films by Walt Disney.
Cool.
And interesting. Like, I thought that was an interesting. Like, I think Hook is vastly different from this, but the general idea makes sense. The world is real. His kids see them eventually. Mm-hmm. He learns to play. He starts having a nice day with them. He falls asleep. and he wakes up and he's like, I'm late for my meeting.
Yeah, and his watch is stopped because he was in the water and in the rain, and he.
Oh, I didn't think about that. I thought his watch just stopped because he was in this.
Oh, I mean that Heffalump trap. He was like in underwater for a while. So
I just realized he crawled through the tree like in Stranger Things to get to the upside down. Only it's the Howderacre Wood is the upside down. Is what I'm saying.
But so Tigger and Eeyore say that they've prepared his briefcase. They talk about the briefcase has important papers, and I like how they put things in perspective for him because they talk about Madeline, and he's like, "Oh, her happiness is everything for me." And Pooh goes, "Is she more important than a briefcase?"
Yeah,
and what's a Madeline? And so they're all just very. The way they pose their questions, I think, starts to get his thinking to shift on what's important to him.
But he still feels he needs to get back to this meeting, and I agree because again, this whole time I'm going, you need to explain to people that like it's not just about you and working.
Like other people are going to lose their jobs.
Yeah, it's a real important thing.
And so Tigger and Eeyore have prepared his briefcase, and they kind of sent him on his way. And we find out we see Tigger with Eeyore, and he's got Piglet says it looks like a poor house, a poor version of a house because it's the roof, I guess, of the house.
Yeah, they're taping it to
his leather folder with all the important papers, and they're tying it to Eeyore with a Tigger knot, the strongest knot. And they never really explain why. I don't know if it's armor for Eeyore so he doesn't get hurt.
There's a part where he goes like, the saddle's too tight at one point when he's sleeping or something at the beginning, and I don't know if it was supposed to be a saddle.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, they're like, these are his important papers, and Tigger's like, oh yeah, I took them out so we could make room for important things. Like,
things to remember us by.
And it was like Eeyore's tail.
And the acorns, or they call them something different. The
that's apparent haycorns.
Haycorns.
So that's something from the book and not from the thing that Piglet loves, haycorns.
Oh, okay.
That's from the book. There's a second thing from the book, and the third thing is that rabbit and owl are actual animals and not stuffed animals. That's from the book.
Okay.
Which I noticed that, and I was kind of like, that's weird.
Yeah. And we will say Rabbit and Owl do not go on the adventure back to London.
Yes.
It's Tigger, Piglet, Eeyore, and Pooh.
So, Christopher Robin sees his... Do we say Ewan McGregor plays Christopher Robin?
We didn't. He does a fantastic job.
Yeah, he's great in this
character.
But his daughter sees him, and he's like, I'm here, but I have to go. And the daughter's really upset, and the wife's like, yeah, of course you have to go. Like,
yeah, we're going to stay here longer, and we're not coming back. Like, and that's
like,
when I think he realizes, oh, I've done damage. Like, I've done damage that I might not be able to repair.
Yes. So he gets on the train. Also, I will say he starts playing Say What You See.
Yes, and then the stranger in the car with him is like...
The most fussy-looking British man with like a bowler hat and glasses and a mustache.
Yeah, but you can already see that him reuniting with his friends has kind of changed his perspective.
Well, that was one of the things is you see him laughing with all of them, which is something, they focus you on after saying I haven't seen you laugh in years.
So the mother tells the daughter, you need to go outside and play.
And she's like, I'm going to play harder than anyone. So she's outside playing tennis with the red balloon, which has gotten... Ewan McGregor tied it to her bike. And she's playing with it. She's like, I'm I've mastered Wimbledon. And you hear all the like, oh, what's a Wimbledon? Like,
and then they're like, oh, good for you. And they're cheering for her. And they're in the forest. And she's like, who's there? And she throws a tennis ball, and it comes back at her, and you can hear the voices of all four of them.
And they fall down the hill, and they start talking to her. And I think this movie does some of the best job of like people reacting pretty appropriately to talking stuffed animals and then getting over it.
Yeah, well, because they know her. Because Pooh's like, oh, this is Madeline, because she has the red balloon, and Pooh had the red balloon. Pooh's the reason the red balloon is there. And she was like, oh, did my dad give this to you? And he's like, no, he wanted it for you. Like, he gave it to you. And so I think that's why she gets over it pretty quickly, is because it's kind of clear they know her dad. She's not really sure why, but they also have his important papers. Mm-hmm. And then they know of her. Her dad has talked about her to them. So
she has to get on the train and take them to London. She writes a note to her mom, who starts freaking out and trying to follow her to the train station, and then misses the train and then drives to London. But I just like all of them. Like,
I love her holding all of them.
Anytime anybody in the movie has to hold a bunch of them, it's so adorable. Like later, Haley Atwell is holding Eeyore and Piglet and Tigger, and even that looks just
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And so they start playing the same game on the train, and she orders 5 cups of tea for her and her stuffed animals.
And I love the woman be like, "Oh, okay, like sure thing."
And then she gets into, I guess, a taxi. It's
It's like a black car or something. It's the London version of
a taxi.
Yeah.
And so at first, like, everything's normal. She's
Black
kind
cab,
of
maybe.
telling the guy where to go. And then he starts to hear them talking, and she's telling them to play nap time. And then he winds up crashing into a newspaper stand.
And then we get a weird, not weird, but just surprising cameo from Mackenzie Crook, who was in Pirates of the Caribbean and the British version of The Office, and Matt Berry, who's Laszlo from What We Do in the Shadows.
And it's such a good little comedy bit.
Because they're talking about, they're like, "You're crazy. What are you talking about?" He's like, "There's a talking. The animals can talk," and she runs off to go get on a truck.
She's like, "Oh, there's my dad," just pointing to a stranger, and the officer, who's Laszlo, is like, "Okay, that's fine, you can go." And then they hear Pooh say something, and then all 3 of them are like, "Well, we didn't hear that. That can't be real." And it's a fun little bit.
But it's fun watching it now and being like, "That's Laszlo." That's, I forgot his name in The Office, but Mackenzie Crook, and I was just like, it was a weird. Let's get these 2 like fairly recognizable British comedy names and put them in this movie. Speaking of which, apparently they originally cast Chris O'Dowd as Tigger's voice. Do you know who Chris O'Dowd is?
I know the name.
The Irish guy from the IT Crowd.
Oh, yes.
Who was the dog in Mary Poppins Returns. And apparently they did it and they tested it and people were really off put because I guess he's doing an English accent.
Oh.
And like, I think it would have been fine if it wouldn't have been Tigger. And I'm glad we did Tigger, but like, I like his voice. I'd like to hear his voice.
Well, Piglet's voice is a little different. And
I liked
Piglet's voice. Again, it matched the inflection and the tone of Piglet really well. So they go on this adventure to London, and his wife comes to the meeting, and you find out.
Oh, go ahead. Are you talking about the golf?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
You find out that Giles, the one who's like, "You need to work all weekend, and I'll be working all weekend as well." He gets in the elevator, and he's got his golf bag, and he's got someone else carrying it for him. And so that's when, you can see the wheels start turning with Christopher Robin, and he's like, "Oh, it was just me who was working all weekend."
Yep.
And so he goes in, and again, Giles tries to take credit. Giles tries to take credit for everything that they've done working all weekend.
Yeah.
And so he starts talking. He goes to open his important papers, and that's when he sees it's Eeyore's tail,
the
a
weather
twig,
vane.
Yeah, the haycorns. And he's like, "Hold on one moment." And then it's an emergency, and his wife is there because she's in a panic because they can't find Maddie. And
he goes to leave, and Giles is like, "What do you think you're doing?" And he just gives Giles the daggers and leaves. It's just like, whatever.
Yeah. And so then they go looking for her. And he reads the note, and because it says expedition, the way it's spelled.
That's the third thing that's specifically in the books, is they talk about expeditions.
Expeditions, that's what it is. So, and the way it's spelled and the way it's said, he goes, "Oh, she's not alone."
And then the wife goes, "Who's she with?" And then they cut to something else. I think it's them in the car.
It's Maddie with traveling in the suitcases.
They're into steamer trunks, and then it's like Tigger starts bouncing, and they fall out of the car. And then it cuts back to him just explaining. He goes, "Well, you see, the wonderful thing about Tigger's is Tigger's," and he's like singing the song, but he's explaining, and she's just like, "You're insane. You've lost
it. Like you did what I said would happen. Like you've lost it."
And at that time, Eeyore and Piglet and Tigger come flying through the air and land on the windshield, and probably the most goofy, action-y part of it.
Yeah.
But it's so funny because you just see her go.
It's such a good payoff.
And he's like, "Christopher Robin," and she's like, "What?"
Yeah, and he's like, "Oh, Eeyore too. Where's Maddie? Like, where's Pooh?"
He goes, "Where's Piglet?" Splat.
Yeah, it's really good. And then they're all in the back of the car, and again, she pretty quickly, she's like, they're asking her how she's doing, and she's like, "I'm fine." And then he introduces her as
he goes,
Evelyn.
He goes, "Hello, stuffed donkey. How are you doing?" It's not, his name's Eeyore. Eeyore, this is Evelyn, my wife. "Hello, Evelyn, my wife."
Yes.
And then like later in the movie, he only knows her as Evelyn, my wife.
Yeah, it's so good. But they find Maddie, and she's with Pooh, and all the papers have blown away, and she's so sad, and she tells him, "I thought if I brought you your papers, you would be happy enough to not send me away." And that's when he's like, "You don't have to go away. You can stay with us. Like, you don't have to go to boarding school. Like, my papers are not important. you are what's important. And Pooh's there and he's kind of smiling. He's got like this little smirk on his face. And she's holding the one paper she saved, and it's kind of this pyramid.
It's
and
pointing out like what part of the population financially they cater to, which is the top.
Yeah.
Because that's who goes on vacation in 1940, whatever.
Yeah. And the wife says something about changing perspective.
Well, first I want to say that I think Ewan McGregor does such a good job here of her doing the whole like, I lost all your papers. I'm so sorry. I know how important they are to you. And he's just like,
you're important to me.
No, those things don't matter. And the way it's written and the way it's done is so genuine and good and not super ham-fisted. Like,
because he says, you're safe. That's what's important.
Yeah.
To me. He says something like that.
Yeah, and she's like, I just don't want to leave. And he's like, if you don't want to, like, we'll discuss this. He's like, it's all well done. But then that's when Haley Atwell is standing behind him,
coming
holding
with
the
all
three
of
of
them.
them.
And she says something about changing perspective, and that's when he looks at the pyramid and he flips it upside down.
And he's like, you're a genius. And they run back to Winslow's. And he points out, he goes, if you are in charge of a huge consortium of jobs. And he goes, the best thing you can do, he goes, the thing you do right now is to do nothing. And that's when Giles says, nothing ever came from nothing. He goes, I beg to differ.
Yeah.
Nothing often leads to the best somethings.
Yes. Oh, let's also talk about how they go through his briefcase when he leaves.
Yeah, they're like, what a nutter.
Yeah,
because
they're seeing the tail. That's how we find out what's in his briefcase.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just like a weird moment. And again, Giles kind of painting him as, he's cracked. Like, we need to just get rid of the whole division.
Well, there's a part where the father goes like, well, didn't you say you worked with him this weekend? Why don't you present?
Yes.
And he's like,
Yeah.
But he comes and he says, if you give more of your people paid time off, they'll want to go on vacation. What do they need for vacations? Luggage.
And if we sell them at a cheaper price, then they can also buy them.
Yeah.
They'll be able to afford them, which means we'll sell more. So
They'll
we'll
wanna go to
actually
the
make
beach.
more money.
They'll want to go to the beach. They'll want to go to their cabins.
Yeah, and then that's when Giles is like,
Who wants a bunch
who
of
wants
riffraff at the beach?
Yeah, and then his dad kind of tells him to be quiet, and he's like, so what were you doing this weekend?
Yeah.
And that's when the golf ball comes out
Yeah,
of
he
his
pulls out a
pocket.
handkerchief and there's a golf ball on it. Which, as someone who's had golf balls in his pocket, there's no way you wouldn't know there's a golf ball.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That sounded super like as someone who keeps
goes
golf
to the
balls.
country club and
Ooh,
golfs.
that's what it sounded like.
Mhm.
Yeah. But I just love, and he calls him a woozle.
He stands up for himself in that moment
Yeah.
too, when Giles is kind of talking down to him and not agreeing with his idea, and
he says, you just did this, you didn't work, like you're the blah,
Yeah.
blah. And he goes, family's what's important. And they come in and they're holding the Pooh Bears.
and friends are what's
friends.
important.
And he goes, that's a great idea, Robin. I think you should work on it. He goes, I will, but right now I'm going to take some time off and I'm going to do nothing with my family.
Yeah.
And as he's turning, like, the whole time he's giving the speech, like, even in the movie, like, all the animals, like, Tigger moves is super animated, but a lot of them just move very, like, simply,
Yeah.
especially Winnie the Pooh. So when they're being held, they just kind of, like, turn their heads ever so slightly and move. And you watch it and you understand why people aren't like, those bears are alive, like, the whole time. Until they start. Yeah. But so you see Giles kind of look at me, he's like, that donkey was staring at me. And his dad's like, you're insane.
Yeah. The other thing we should say we haven't talked about is his staff. His staff have a lot of little funny comedic bits in the background, both in the beginning when we first meet them, to when they're trying to read lips, when Giles comes in and like tells him you need to cut percentages, and then they're also all in the background during this meeting as well, and then they're in a scene at the end.
Do you remember?
Is kind of fun.
Do you remember The Office when they were like trying to buy the Michael Scott Paper Company? And there's a scene where Mindy Kaling has her ear on the door, and Angela goes, "What do you hear?" And she goes, "Wah, wah, 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 wah." I don't know, that's just what that reminded me of like them listening, like, "What do you hear?" And then she like could read lips, and it was not at all.
Something
saying.
about apples.
Yeah.
But then he takes them to the 100-acre wood, and it's so sweet. And they have tea, and they do nothing in the 100-acre wood as a family.
Yeah.
And
they have a picnic.
Yeah, they have a picnic. It's such a sweet way to end it.
Well, he goes and he sits in the same spot where he talked to Pooh when he kind of said goodbye when he was growing up, and he
brings him honey. Again.
Guys, if you get, this has got to be some sort of weird phobia or issue, because I was just like, "Bleh."
To me, it's thinking about having a stuffed animal and getting something sticky on it. Like, it's not a phobia. It's like I've had gum
Yeah.
in my hair or in a stuffed animal, and I didn't eat honey as a child, but like,
yeah,
it gives you that response you would get if you had a stuffed animal that honey got spilt on it.
as a huge Star Wars fan, anytime there's like a hoodie or like a onesie that is
Furry.
Chewbacca, I get sent to it, and the first thing I think is, I can't imagine getting any, crap in there.
Yeah.
And it is a testament again to the CGI and how it looks real and it looks fuzzy and
They look like they have weight to them.
and
Like
they
when they're
move in a
holding
very
them,
specific
yeah,
way.
when they're holding them, they look
Yes.
like as it would if you were holding a stuffed animal that was kind of filled with fluff. Like
It looks
that.
even a little more like that. Like every time they drop it, it's a little more than a stuffed animal.
Well,
'cause-
almost like beanbag stuffed animal.
yeah, because
which they
it's
make
not
those.
just solid weight; it's floppy.
Mm-hmm,
It's really like, I mean, okay, so the top movies of that year were, I think, Avengers: Infinity War and stuff like that. So I understand why maybe is Avengers: Infinity War, Black Panther, and Jurassic World. So
Oh.
an Avengers movie, one of the hugely successful first African American superhero, not first, but like such a big,
In
for
such a
that
mainstream
community.
way,
And then
yeah.
Jurassic World, that's Fallen Kingdom, so it's not even that one. But like Jurassic World, which was, became this weird license to print money for a while. So I can understand that one, not being on the, let's see, it's
Well,
like
they
Incredibles
were
2.
all
Yeah.
heavy action films. This
Right.
is not an action film, so
Not
it's
at
kind of
all.
hard to compare it or put it up against that. But it was so good, and it was one that I remember when we saw the trailer. It was one that was on our list to see, and
Yeah.
we just never got around to seeing it.
And, now that you have heard all of the plot, I hope you go back and watch it. I may put something at the beginning of this that is just us going, hey, we really enjoyed this, and we highly
Talked pretty
encourage you to
yeah.
watch it.
Well, we talked pretty thoroughly about it, which we don't
Yeah.
always do with the live actions, but I can't express enough that it gives the same feeling. If you go back and listen to our Winnie the Pooh episode, the animated version,
Yeah.
we kept talking about the feeling we had and the nostalgia we had for the characters and for the stories, and it gives you the same feelings. And I was so impressed that they were able to translate that into live action and to make you feel the exact same way.
But
that
also
we
as
felt.
adults too, there's a lesson here, not necessarily just for kids, but
Yes.
for people our age.
Yeah.
And it's a simple lesson, but it's one that I think they handle in a good way. So it's not only maintaining that childlike simplicity,
Mhm.
it's using it in a way that doesn't feel infantilizing some important issues or patronizing them. It really Cinderella is really good, but this is a very close second to my favorite of the
I would agree. Yeah, I would
live
agree.
action
And again,
ones.
another thing is it does well as it takes the core of the story and it expands on it.
Yeah.
And I think that moving forward, that's going to be our criteria on what makes a good live action now
Yeah,
that we've seen
agreed.
two very solid live actions close together.
Mm-hmm. We've got some, we're at about 38 minutes.
Okay.
It's a good place to close it. I don't have
Yeah.
anything else to say.
I think my only other thing to say is go watch it. Stop what you're doing if you haven't seen it.
Yeah,
and really watch it. It's so good, especially if you grew up with these characters. If you have even if you don't have a connection to these characters, I think you will. But especially if that nostalgia's there, I think you'll really enjoy it.
What do you think about letting kids watch it? Like,
I think it's
I think some of the war stuff. There's a little brief war scene at the beginning.
what I will say is I don't think kids will pick up on some of the things that we picked up on. That we were like,
Yeah.
oh, this is really melancholy or this is really sad. Thinking about like their relationship and
Yeah.
their marital relationship. I don't know, depending on the age of children, I don't know that they'll really pick up on the severity of those lines. Do you know
Maybe
what I'm saying?
I don't know, but I could see them kind of just being
Empathic about it,
and
yeah.
being like something's wrong here.
That's
maybe,
true.
but it's I don't know. If you're as always, let us know if you're a parent.
Yeah,
and
we'd
how
love
you
to know
feel.
what your kids think of it
707
too.
yo TRPD1. That's 707 yo TRPD1.
We'd love to hear if your kids have watched it. What was their reaction to it? If they've seen both of them. But I do think children would enjoy this one.
yeah, guys, we really enjoyed this. We hope you did too. And we'll see you next time for the next mini-tale, which I'm not sure what we'll see now. It's a surprise to us. It's a surprise to you.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll put up another poll and you can pick wrongly.
But we will get to it if you vote for it. All right. Take care, listeners.
Thanks, guys. Hello, fairy tale friends. We got another call on our hotline, so we're going to play that real quick. But if you want your message played on the podcast, go ahead and give us a call at 707-YO-TRPD1. That's 707-968-7731. Thanks, guys.
Hey, hope you guys are staying warm. This is other Ryan from Roger Rabbit Podcast. Wanted just to give you a shout out. I heard your watching your minisode about Mary Poppins Returns, and I totally agree. When I watched that movie, I realized I was kind of exhausted from doing a lot of mental gymnastics to get myself agreeing that I liked it. It's kind of what I did when I saw episode 1 in the theaters way back. You Star Wars people out there. This just doesn't quite come together like I wanted it to, but there's enough there to be like, oh, that's kind of cool. But if you really want a spiritual successor to Mary Poppins, you need to watch Bedknobs and Broomsticks. You get hand-drawn animation with live action. You get magic. You get kids. You get all this cool old-school Disney stuff. You get good songs. It's a classic. Bedknobs and Broomsticks. Check it out. Hope you guys are staying safe and staying warm.
Thanks for listening to Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries.
If you want to tell us your favorite Disney villain and why it's guest on, send us an email at trprincessdiaries@gmail.com.
Or you can send a tweet about how great Maleficent is to @TRPDiaries.
Check out our Facebook group by searching for Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries.
Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries are available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, and many more.
Wherever you hear us, please be our knight in shining armor and give us a 5-star review.
Thanks again, and until next time, remember to always live happily ever after.